We should talk about why a ton of people are freaking out about Jeff Bezos right now. Right? A lot of it's stemming from the CNBC interview that he did that sparked a lot of backlash online. And we'll start with a bit that's probably gone the most viral.
I pay billions of dollars in taxes. And it's a perfect, again, if people want me to pay more billions, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens.
So that did not go over well with a ton of people, including fellow billionaire and California gubernatorial candidate Tom Steyer, who wrote, "This is bullshit. I promise you, tax billionaires invest in schools." And you had New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani saying, "I know a few teachers in Queens who would beg to differ." And generally you had others saying that the optics of a billionaire that's sitting at his rocket factory saying that him paying more in taxes, that it wouldn't help anyone, is absurd. Arguing, hey, let's put that little theory to test. Try it out. See what happens. But also I'll say in fairness, his tax commentary came amid a larger conversation about wealth inequality and how to address it. Right? And actually, his main point was that if you really want to help low-income Americans, they should pay no taxes at all.
It's kind of a tale of two economies. So you have a bunch of people in this country who are doing really well, but you also have a bunch of people in this country who are struggling. Politicians are using the kind of age-old technique. So there's this tale of two economies, and they're using this age-old technique of, picking a villain and pointing fingers. But the problem is that doesn't solve anything. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? So people talk about, making the tax system more progressive. How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is somebody at all? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%.
Now, one of the things I'll say with that is that according to the Tax Foundation, if you look into it, the nurse with a $75,000 salary that's being talked about is not actually in the bottom group of earners. In 2023, the bottom half of taxpayers made around $54,000 or less. But there are politicians who agree with this kind of thinking. Earlier this year, for example, you had Senator Cory Booker proposing something called the Keep Your Pay Act, which calls for the first $75,000 of income to be tax-free in households filing joint returns. So, there is a conversation to be had, though at the same time, you have people saying the thing about him not paying millions more in taxes and don't tax people that are making under $75,000, that is seemingly disconnected or adverse to each other. But also I'll say that was far from the only subject that Bezos sparked outrage on when it comes to his personal massive wealth. Right, when it came to charitable donations, he said that he plans on giving away most of his wealth during his lifetime, but he also said,
if I do my job right, the value to society and civilization from my for-profit companies will be much, much larger than the good that I do with my charitable giving.
And there what you saw is that you quickly had people questioning the good of his for-profit companies because their efficiency comes at a cost. There have been reports on high rates of warehouse worker injuries at Amazon, workers saying that they struggle just to afford food and rent. Some even saying Jeff Bezos' companies exploit taxpayers to be successful, saying they receive enormous tax breaks and subsidies and force taxpayers to subsidize the poverty wages they pay their employees, driving their profitability. And that, as others say, sure, his company is going to improve the lives of a lot of people, but Bezos is so rich, why doesn't he just do both and up his charitable giving as well? Especially since on the Forbes billionaire list, his philanthropy score sits at a 2 out of 5. Also of note with all this is that when it comes to his own enterprises, he spoke about the mass layoffs that recently happened at the Washington Post. Or with the interviewer noting that in the past, Bezos referred to the paper as a public trust, so why not subsidize the business to maintain that? And to that he said,
the Post needs to be a profitable enterprise that stands on its own 2 feet. It needs to be.
Does it?
Yes.
That's a question. Some people say it should be a trust.
And let me tell you why.
Okay.
Because it's a measure of its relevance. If people won't pay for our product, it's not a good enough product. I don't want it to be a charity. It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be.
But there you have people questioning how laying off hundreds of reporters is going to improve or make the product more relevant. And that, as you had others noting that at least some of the paper's big subscriber loss, it's actually because of Bezos' own personal actions. As we've talked about, they lost 10% of their subscribers after Bezos said that the paper should not make an endorsement in the 2024 election, and more dropped after he said that he'd reshape the paper's editorial strategy, many believing that he made those moves to curry favor with Trump. Though I will say he pushed back on claims that he is a pro-Trump businessman.
I'm on the side of America, and that is so important. And that's where business leaders should be. We get perceived as being partisan or whatever. I was helping Obama every chance I could. I was helping Biden every chance I could.
But then also with that, he gave Trump some praise.
Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due. I mean, I'm comparing him to his first term.
Yeah.
And I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term.
And this choice there to specifically call Trump mature and disciplined, it took some people by surprise. And it kind of did absolutely nothing to help the fact that people see him as being in the president's pocket. People arguing, okay, just look at some of the posts on this man's Truth Social page and tell me that he is mature. But, with all that said, I then got to pass the question off to you of what are your thoughts here with Bezos? Do you agree with his takes or like the take, or do you think that he's underplaying what he himself can do to better the country? Also, do you see him as a nonpartisan figure as he says that he is? Why or why not? Or really any opinions and reactions here? But the next up, in some crazy news we should talk about today, there's a bitter custody battle between an influencer and a former boy band member that's now been escalated into federal murder for hire charges. So this is Gabriela Gonzalez. She's a 24-year-old content creator with roughly 500,000 followers on both her TikTok and Instagram pages. She posts lifestyle and travel content along with videos documenting her day-to-day life as the mom of a 7-year-old daughter, Lavender.
I became a single teen mother at, I would just say 17 because I was basically doing it by myself. 5 years ago, being alone was like the worst thing that could have happened to me. And now being alone is the best.
Right, and then Lavender's father is the other big player in this story, and that's Jack Avery. He's a former member of the boy band Why Don't We, which had some moderate success in the 2010s. And a big key thing with all this is that Gabriela and Jack, they're not together anymore. In fact, they've been locked in a bitter custody battle over Lavender for years now. Back in 2021, Gabriela reportedly started painting Jack as an unfit and dangerous parent in court. At the same time, her dad, Francisco Gonzalez, reportedly hired a PI to collect photos and videos of Jack, trying to find evidence of him smoking, drinking, or just anything that could be used against him in court. Right, and that appears to be when things started to snowball, because from there, Francisco allegedly talked to Gabriela's new boyfriend, Kai Cordry, to try to recruit someone to threaten and harass Jack. And because of Kai's position as a surf instructor in Hawaii, they settled on a retired MMA fighter living in Maui. Though it doesn't actually look like the person got involved at any point. But it was Gabriela that kicked things to the next level, because it was around this time that she began to openly talk about wanting Jack dead and hiring a hitman to do the job. She and Kai even allegedly went online to find an assassin on the dark web. In May of 2021, it looks like Kai made an account on a murder for hire site under the screen name Lizard King 69, with prosecutors saying that he identified Jack as the target, gave an address, and even said that Jack, quote, should be killed by whatever method was easiest. And Francisco reportedly gave Kai $14,000 that was transferred into crypto and used as front money for this whole scheme. First, $10,000 into the guise of payment for web services, and then another $4,000 later on. But these three masterminds, they very quickly caught the attention of the feds. I mean, by September of 2021, Kai was reportedly talking to an FBI agent who was posing as a hitman from the site where they posted Jack as the target. The agent reportedly spoke with Kai on the phone about Jack as the target, payment, and proof of death, with Kai allegedly saying that Gabriela wanted Jack dead and that her father would pay for it. And Francisco then allegedly confirmed his involvement by texting the agent a password established in a previous payment. And then about a year later, prosecutors say that Gabriela talked to Kai on a recorded call about those communications with the supposed hitman and how to respond to the threat of exposure. Now, through all this, Jack says that he was warned that someone was trying to kill him, saying that FBI agents had contacted him to give him a heads up. But it wasn't until just recently that Gabriela, her father, and Kai were finally arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and solicitation to commit murder, which if they are convicted, that means them facing 25 years to life in state prison. You had the LA County District Attorney's Office releasing a statement saying, this was a lengthy investigation that was initiated by the FBI and officially turned over to our office. Most fathers raise their children to respect the law, but here we have a dad who allegedly helped his daughter and her boyfriend break the law in the most sinister way imaginable. Right, and so as far as what happens from here, we have to wait to see. Gabriela's arraignment, it happened yesterday, but it ended without a plea, and her lawyer requested more time to review the evidence. Right, and she's scheduled to go back in tomorrow, but what we do know is that Jack has filed for a domestic violence restraining order from Gabriela and full legal and physical custody of their daughter, with his filing saying that the ongoing harassment and safety concerns caused him fear of death, chronic anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And adding, Gabriela attempted to kill me by hiring a hitman. Gabriela is not stable and not able to act in the best interest of our daughter. Which, that seems about right. That's kind of actually, if anything, putting it lightly. And it kind of gets thrown on top of the pile of just news stories that remind us that the influencers or the people that we see on our phones or whatever screen, we never really know what's going on behind the scenes. And then there's more we got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, let's be real. At this point, it's not the night out that gets you, it's the next morning when you have things to do. Right? Having a good time's easy, but showing up the next day like a functioning human, that can be a real challenge. And that is also why I've been using today's sponsor, sponsor ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic. But this isn't one of those drink more water and manifest wellness type fixes. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And how it works is that when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's a buildup of this byproduct, not just dehydration, that's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I use it anytime I've got plans the next day, which is pretty much all the time, gym, work, like life just refusing to leave me alone. It's packed with reasons to get out there. Games, weddings, everything in between. Do not let the next morning slow you down. Just go to ZBiotics.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 15% off your first order. Or hey, you can just scan that QR code and you'll feel your best tomorrow. But then, diving right back into the news, one of the things that we learned from the elections last night is that the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump, though he is playing with fire. And the big races that cemented both of those things was Thomas Massie losing in Kentucky, Brad Raffensperger just getting crushed in Georgia. But also, given the numbers, especially those in Kentucky, you have many wondering, what is this gonna mean in a general election, right? Especially if Trump remains as unpopular as he is right now. And to really get to that place responsibly to talk about and answer that question, we have to look at Kentucky first, right? Especially Congressman Thomas Massie.
Thomas Massie's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one. Dealing with him is just horrible. I don't think he's a Republican. I think he's actually a Democrat. It's not easy beating incumbents, but we have a great guy running against Massie. Massie's a terrible, I think the worst congressman the Republican Party's ever had.
In reality, Massie votes with the Republican Party most of the time. But Massie opposed Trump's tax and spending budget package last year, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, because he said it would drive up the federal deficit. He also, of course, famously led the charge to release the Epstein files, and he's opposed the US and Israeli war against Iran. And with that, condemned American aid to Israel and criticized the influence of the pro-Israel lobby in American politics. So all of that kind of together made him Trump's #1 target, as well as the target of the very same pro-Israel lobby that he spoke out against. $19 million was spent to benefit Massie's Trump-backed opponent, a former Navy SEAL by the name of Ed Galrine, including nearly $9.4 million from AIPAC and other pro-Israel interest groups. But with that, Candace Owens, who had become a vocal supporter of Massie, actually has a different take on this whole thing, saying that whatever the result, the money spent on this election showed that Trump has lost control of MAGA, and adding, having to run to the Zionist mafia to spend a record-breaking amount on a congressional seat means he knows fully well the party no longer marches to his command. And Tucker Carlson not only pushed a similar narrative, he took his message straight to the Israeli media this week, by telling the country's Channel 13 that Netanyahu, the media, and donors, they pushed Trump into a war against Iran.
Donors to Donald Trump, people in the media class here, were effectively working on behalf of the Israeli government. The Israeli prime minister pushed the US president, who turned out to be far weaker than I understood, into a war that hurts the United States.
And with that, you've got people saying, while they think that Owens and Carlson, they are conspiracy theorists on a number of fronts, you have many arguing that Massie's race, it shows that there is a real conversation to be had around how money is being spent on politics in the States. Especially because in this case, the money appears to have paid off. Galrine defeated Massie with around 55% of the vote. And so one of the things you ended up seeing was Massie kicking off his concession speech by saying,
I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrine in Tel Aviv.
As he also appeared to criticize the total loyalty that Trump's demanded from the Republican Party.
If you always vote with the president, if the legislative branch always votes with the president, we do have a king. If the legislative branch always votes whichever way the wind is blowing, then we have mob rule. But if the legislative branch and the representatives and the senators that serve with it always follow the Constitution, we have a republic.
Right, then as far as other reactions, you had a lot of people kind of linking Massie's defeat to the Epstein files getting released. Senator Chris Murphy posting, so there you have it. If you lead a campaign against powerful pedophiles, you get drummed out of the Republican Party. As well as Marjorie Taylor Greene writing, releasing the Epstein files was our demise, but it was worth every single bit because now everyone knows the truth. But at the same time, you also had other reactions like that of Randy Fine, who wrote, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. The rest of us get the privilege of living in it. And while Massie, he's definitely not the first person that Trump's taken aim at for being unloyal in his eyes, he definitely will not be the last getting the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Right, and with that in mind, you just gotta look to John Cornyn of Texas, and he'll be defending his seat in the primary this next Tuesday against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. And a huge thing with that one is that Paxton was actually endorsed by Trump yesterday, and the specifics of his support was very interesting, with Trump writing, Ken is a strong supporter of terminating the filibuster and, very importantly, the Save America Act. Well, then also adding, John Cornyn is a good man and I worked with him, but he was not supportive of me when times were tough. And that endorsement, it stands out for two reasons. One, while Cornyn and Paxton were kind of neck and neck for a while, Paxton's kind of jumped ahead, and so he seems like he's more of the sure thing. So you have some claiming that Trump's jumping on now so he can take credit. But then also too, this endorsement stands out because unlike with Massey or Cassidy even, Cornyn's never really seriously broken ranks within the party. In fact, just last week, he proposed this bill that would name a Texas highway in honor of the president. So maybe I should then also add a third thing, and that is that Democrats, they are happy because Paxton, they see as maybe the easier opponent to beat in a general election. But that then brings us to the final state. It's my own Georgia. And with Georgia, you have outlets like Politico now reporting that the MAGA takeover of the Georgia GOP is nearly complete. With the Georgia Republican Party chair, Josh McCoon, telling the outlet, it's key to success in a Republican primary in Georgia today to either have the president's endorsement or be able to make the case to voters that you're certainly a Trump-aligned candidate. And in regards to the Senate, everyone knew that John Ossoff was going to win. He didn't even have a Democratic primary challenger. But on the Republican side, it's now down to a Trump-backed candidate by the name of Mike Collins and a guy by the name of Derek Dooley, who, I will say, despite the lack of an endorsement from Trump, has sort of styled himself as a pro-Trump candidate, including a Georgia First slogan. And while that race is going to be very enlightening to watch, one of the biggest ones is obviously the governor's race, right? Especially when you take in all the context and the history, right? Brian Kemp, who was among several state officials who rejected Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, he's leaving office because he hit his term limit. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who famously refused Trump's demand that he find enough votes to help him win, leading to Trump to brand him an enemy of the people, some making death threats against him and his family. In some ways, he seemed, at least early on, the obvious choice to replace Kemp. But what we saw, even just from original polling, is that his principled stance, it cost him. And that is even though he resisted openly criticizing Trump during his campaign. And in the end, he didn't even finish top 2. Instead, what we're seeing is that there's going to be a runoff between Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who's backed by Trump, and billionaire Rick Jackson, who isn't backed by Trump, but also whose campaign has clearly marketed him as a Trump-aligned candidate. And whoever ends up winning between those two are going to face former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who secured the Democratic nomination, as the party is going to try to win the office for the first time in 24 years. Also, on the note of an effort to break a decades-long streak, the state failed yesterday. Because as we've talked about in previous shows, with the Georgia Supreme Court, a sitting justice has reportedly never lost re-election in the state, at least in more than a century. And because recent decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court, they've left the states with more leeway in matters like reproductive and voting rights, the Georgia Supreme Court, it was kind of under a watchful eye. A lot of money and attention went into trying to make history. Or with former President Barack Obama, the state Democratic Party, and pro-abortion rights groups backing Miracle Rankin and Jen Jordan. But as far as what ended up happening is that they both lost, though by greatly different means. Bethel narrowly defeated Rankin with around 51% of the vote, and Warren won against Jordan with almost 60% of the vote. And I'm actually going to end today's show with a little opinion section on this because I think it is an important thing. There's something to learn here and remember. But for right now, it brings us back to the question of how a Trump-backed candidate is going to fare against Democrats in the general election, right? Especially in more competitive races. Because the New York Times, he had a poll this week, found that Trump's approval rating among Republicans, it's still at 82%, but overall, his approval rating's down to 37%. Nearly 2 in 3 voters disapprove both of his handling of the economy and the war in Iran. So there is a very real possibility that, being a full-throated MAGA diehard, it's exactly what you need to win the Republican nomination, but exactly what you do not want in a close race come November. Especially if people who are aligned with Massey, who are obviously, even in Kentucky, not the majority of Republican voters. Are there enough usually reliable Republican voters that all of a sudden have soured on the president and people who align themselves with him? Right? While an 82% approval rating among Republicans is fantastic, if you have made that other 18% really want you to go fuck yourself, and you've as far as the independents, you've really soured them, are they generally screwing themselves? Could be, might be, but also a big thing to remember is there is a lot of time between now and November 4th. Situations change, opinions change, and a number of these things are going to run off. So even those races haven't fully been finished. But hey, with that in mind, I got to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Is Trump accidentally setting up Republicans for a failure come November, at least in competitive races, or is that hopium and copium? And then there's more we got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, my problems have never been ideas. My problem is my brain treating every notification, random thought, or ceiling stain like it deserves equal priority, which is then also why I'm thankful for today's sponsor, Brain.fm. Right? It's not just lo-fi beats with better branding. Brain.fm is audio engineered by neuroscientists to help put your brain into the state that you want. Focus, relaxation, sleep, creativity, all of that. It uses patented neural phase locking technology. Basically, audio designed to stop your brain from wandering like an unleashed toddler in a target. It adapts to you personally, just adjusts the neural effect level depending on how chaotic your brain feels. Which I will say is something I appreciate because some days my brain, it needs a gentle push and others professional intervention. And they've got modes for deep work, creativity, relaxation, sleep, power naps, even an ADHD specific mode that feels a little too targeted. And unlike your regular playlists that fight for your attention, Brain.fm fades into the background so you can focus. And it's also the only music app backed by the National Science Science Foundation grant studying how sound affects focus. So if your brain feels like 38 browser tabs and one mysterious noise that you can't identify, go to brain.fm/DeFranco or just scan that QR code on the screen to get 30 days free. That's brain.fm/DeFranco for a free month to see what it feels like when your brain finally decides to cooperate. But then diving right back into the news for our final block today, I've got 3 things. And it starts with Trump saving his and his family's asses and a deal with the IRS that protects them from further investigations or prosecutions related to any current tax inquiries. Right, and this is actually in addition to the anti-weaponization fund settlement that we talked about yesterday, which the DOJ said that the Trump family wouldn't get a payout from. But now you report saying that cutting these investigations short, it saves them over $100 million. And so of course, people have questions. We're looking at the deal itself. It's actually illegal for the president and most other executive officials to make decisions around IRS audits, but that law doesn't hit the attorney general, or the same attorney general that used to be his personal attorney, and apparently that's how they worked this around. Because sure enough, Todd Blanche is the one who signed the official document. But also, even with that, you have experts saying that the IRS would need to act to make the release of claims effective, which could raise additional questions about whether there has been unlawful political interference in the audit process, calling this a breathtaking abuse of the tax and legal system. With also Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying it's a get-out-of-jail-free card for the president, adding, he sued the government he runs, had his own DOJ settle the case, and pocketed the prize. Special IRS protection for the Trump family. That is self-dealing with a government seal. But then we also have to talk about how Republican Bill Cassidy just sided with Senate Democrats on legislation to force Trump out of the war with Iran, with Cassidy flipping after losing the Louisiana primary to the MAGA-backed candidate Julia Letlow. And yeah, isn't it funny how when they lose power or they decide they're not going to run again, all of a sudden they become a different person? But yeah, you know, Cassidy wasn't able to get back in Trump's good graces since he voted against him in his impeachment trial over the J6 riots. Trump also added a little insult to injury, posting that Cassidy's disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now a part of legend, and it's nice to see that his political career is over. But with that, you had Cassidy going back to Washington saying that he was proud of his work to uphold the Constitution and that he would carefully consider how he would vote on Trump's priorities moving forward. And so I guess Trump's war with Iran, it didn't make the cut now, with him saying on social media, while I support the administration's efforts to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, the White House and Pentagon have left Congress in the dark on Operation Epic Fury, saying until the administration provides clarity, no congressional authorization or extension can be justified. Now with all this, Democrats, they've been trying to push the War Powers Resolution for months, but they couldn't get the votes that they needed to make it happen until now. Right, and with that, there were 3 Republicans that were absent on Tuesday who could come back and turn things around with their votes if they maintain their stance on the war. But still, you have reports saying that this is a sign of just how uneasy Republicans are becoming with the war. And you've got Chuck Schumer claiming Republicans are starting to crack and momentum is building to check Trump. And while I won't be holding my breath to see how that plays out, outside of Congress, the country in general is feeling the effects of this war, especially at the gas station. You've got reports saying the gas prices have hit $4 a gallon in all 50 states, with 7 states even paying at least $5 a gallon. And there's a very real cost there. It's costing Americans millions of dollars a day. It's putting a strain on small businesses and it's driving up inflation. And you have experts saying that if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed through midsummer, things could get even worse than this. Right, but then for the final thing today, I kind of want to just end on a little bit of an op-ed section, just me talking to you, opinions, all that. Because last night as I was driving back home, there were some elections that were wins, some that were losses, some that I was just shocked by. And really, one of the biggest takeaways was that reminder of not everyone is as invested and knowledgeable about what's happening right now. And that is in no way a dig. You've got people out there just trying to survive. They've got 2 jobs to pay bills or their healthcare. They've got kids and, you know, a Tuesday in May, they're not thinking page 3 of the election about the Georgia Supreme Court races, who, by the way, do not have a D or an R next to their name, even though the Georgia Supreme Court is seen as being controlled by Republicans 8-1 or 9-0. And a lot of it made me puzzled about a thing that really people have thought about for years and years, and that is how to break through to kind of low information voters, especially on something that is not top of mind. Right? Because when you actually look at the data, it is insane. Right? So both Georgia Supreme Court incumbents, they won. Bethel beat Miracle Rankin 51-49, about a 2-point race, roughly 43,000 votes out of nearly 2 million that were cast. But Warren beat Jen Jordan 59-41. It was an almost 19-point race, about 360,000 votes apart. It's a 2 wins with the Republican-appointed incumbents. The streak is intact, and I just can't stop looking at all the numbers. Rankin and Jordan, they campaigned together, every press conference, every interview when we had them on the show, together when they were endorsed by Obama and Kamala Harris. They were endorsed together. The signs people have in their yards, it has both of their names on it. They were a package deal. That was the whole strategy. But the Dem electorate, they gave Rankin almost 947,000 votes and gave Jordan 781,000, which is a roughly 165,000 vote gap between the 2 candidates who ran the exact same campaign together. Before anyone's like, oh, well, you know, maybe they like this person more over this issue, they were essentially the same person, just with different names on the ballot. All while, by the way, more Democrats in Georgia went out to vote than Republicans. John Ossoff, the Democratic incumbent, who is was literally running against nobody, he pulled in around 100 to 150,000 more votes than the entire Republican Senate field combined. And so if you get a lot of people that are voting down ballot, you expect Democratic wins left and right. But that brings us to the Georgia Supreme Court race technically being considered nonpartisan, so you don't get a D or an R next to the name. So this is anecdotal, but based off of people that I was talking to, a lot of people just didn't know who they were voting for. They knew, hey, I got to do this in the governor's race. Hey, I know Ossoff, I know maybe a person here or there, but when it came to Miracle and Jen versus Bethel and Warren, one, there were a lot of people that thought that everyone on their ballot was a Democrat because Georgia has an open primary. So when you go to the polls, you ask for, oh, I want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot. Then also too, you had a number of people going, well, it wasn't a partisan race. So I kind of just tried to use context clues to go, who's the Democrat here? A lot more people assumed a name like Miracle would be that of a Democratic candidate. Whereas Jen Jordan, that already sounds maybe neutral enough, but also her name on the ballot was Jennifer Our Jordan. Right, and then actually with that, as I was explaining that to someone last night as we were seeing the results come in, they were like, well, that's kind of on the voter. If you're casting your ballot and you're unsure of something, just Google it. Here's the thing. In Georgia, you cannot use your phone inside of the voting booth. It's illegal under state law. It's a misdemeanor. Fair game. I wasn't aware of that the first time that I voted about, what was it, a year and a half or whenever ago. I was casting my ballot. Someone got yelled at. I was like, holy shit. And so this time around when I went to vote, I had paper. You can have paper. That's fine. But you can't use your phone. So ultimately, I end up just kind of I feel frustrated. I don't feel angry. A lot of people have been expressing anger. I'm not angry at the voters. And I really don't think that the answer is to shame voters who guessed wrong. The answer, I think, is just making sure that by the time that a voter walks into the booth, they already know which name matches their values. And a big part of what I'm feeling is kind of more frustration with the DNC, or at least the makeup of what it is right now, right? Because this feels like more of a campaign problem, a party infrastructure problem. Some will also argue, that it's a ballot design problem or a state law problem, but that's kind of a step two thing. It all comes down to information. And I say all this not acting like I have the answer that magically reaches regular people who are just busy with their lives as ears. But what I do know is that until the information gap closes, like this is the result you're gonna see in the further down the ballot races. And it's part of the reason why you're seeing Kemp and others trying to make more races nonpartisan. So while I personally see the results of these Georgia Supreme Court races as maybe not necessarily generational fumble, I've seen some people saying that maybe more of a decades-ish fumble. You can see that the Dems and or the people that are not Trump aligned in Georgia, they are fired up. They just need to be directed better. But that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is the end of your Wednesday Philip DeFranco show dive into the news. Thank you for watching. And also, if you're not 100% filled in, you want more to consume and maybe actually be a little bit cathartic, I got a brand new episode of Crashing Out that just came out right now, today. If you're on YouTube, you can tap or click right here, go straight to that video, or I even got links in the description everywhere I post these videos. But no matter what you do, let me just say thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow. This fund is going to pay Jan 6 rioters.
That is Law and Order leaving this country.
There's something that feels weirder about the last 3 weeks.
What is MAGA versus lib-coded? There's no in between.
I feel like you are doing this because I like a middle ground gray area.
Drake, MAGA or lib-coded?
Sometimes questions are questions, and then sometimes questions are weapons.
I don't know if you guys noticed this whole episode, I've been kind of smiling more. It's because I saw monster trucks.
Someone's got to tell my gas stations that the war is done.